Throne&Liberty launched 5 days ago, and many players are still on the sideline wondering if it's worth a long-term investment. After this video you know exactly if you should jump in or not. We've gathered feedback from the biggest names in streaming and gaming about Throne&Liberty. Plus, we collected all the data from the game's launch, including stats and numbers, and we will compare it to similar launches like Lost Ark and New World. And boy, this will surprise you. So let's find out if Throne&Liberty is worth your time investment, and if it's still around in 6 months. Let's start with the king of internet, Asmongold. His review was mixed. His first impressions of the game were: the combat is very clunky, the world is great, the story is the usual story we have from MMOs, but in general it's a very good impression, but the combat makes it mixed. He said also, if the combat would be as good as World of Warcraft Classic or as good as Lost Ark combat, then the game would actually be S tier for him. But in general it's a mixed review as well as the reviews on Steam. Let's have a look at the reviews at Steam. The reviews on Steam are mixed as well, same as Asmongold's first impressions. And when you look at it, 56% of the 14,000 user reviews for this game are positive. 56%. So that means also 44% are mediocre or bad. A lot of stuff to do for Throne&Liberty. So next up is Shroud. Going over to Shroud's review about Throne&Liberty. His review about Throne&Liberty was, in case of numbers, a 7.5 out of 10. He wanted to rate it in the beta a 6 out of 10, but it improved to a 7.5 out of 10 for him. The only thing is the combat is a little bit clunky still. He's already level 50, but he says also, Throne&Liberty says, if you progress more, the combat gets smoother and smoother. We will see if that happens actually. But he says also, not a bad game, not as good as Lost Ark. That are his thoughts, but it has a lot of potential. And the second person, which is complaining a little bit about the combat. Shroud also was talking about the pay to win in the game, and he says the pay to win in the game is actually not that bad, because in Throne&Liberty you play 2 weapons, main weapon and secondary weapon, and it's actually very punishing if you level up a weapon and invest in these kind of weapons and you want to swap stuff like that, so it's a very high time investment to level up weapons and stuff like that. And he said he actually wants to play 3 weapons. He plays a great sword and shield, and he wants actually to play a dagger as well, but he cannot swipe it, so he cannot swipe progression, and he said you cannot swipe actually progression in this game, so the pay to win is not that bad in his opinion. So what is in the West actually a very good thing. In the East, it's another story. Sodapoppin actually said it's a mediocre game for himself. It's a 6 or 7 out of 10 game for him. He's not very impressed, but he likes the game. He still plays it a little bit. He gives it a good chance, I would say, to level up to max level and to explore a little bit more, but still also the same issues as talked about before, and also a mixed review. Now, a person which reviews I, for myself, value really high when it comes to MMOs, because he's the king of MMOs. His whole channel is focused around MMOs. We are talking about the Lazy Peon. He posted a short video about the progress system of the weapons, because it's such a pain in the ass actually. And in the beginning he said he has okay time with the game, so I guess it sounds a little bit like it's a mixed review as well from the MMO king Lazy Peon. So listening to all these feedbacks and reviews from these famous streamers, still keep in mind the game is free to play. You can give it a shot for free. It has no barrier of entry. You lose nothing to try it out and figure out for yourself. But what is pretty interesting for me personally when I start a game, I want to see that the game will be still a really popular game in the future, because the success of an MMO is based on a very big player base. And if we look at the player bases from, for example, Lost Ark or New World, Lost Ark is still okay, but New World, I saw today, for example, they only have 5,000 players on Steam. What is for an MMO really, really bad. And don't want to invest my time into a MMO which will have such a downfall in a couple months, because it's a waste of time. So, to prevent this, let's have a look into the stats. Okay, first let's dive into the Steam charts of each game, and let's see how many players played on Steam. That's our only point of view where we can track how many players play the game at the moment of Lost Ark, New World, and now Throne and Liberty. Let's see, we see here the chart of Lost Ark. It popped really big at the start of the launch, because it peaked at 1.3 million people. So Lost Ark was a really big success in case of the launch. But as we see today, the launch was February 2022, and end of 2022 it was at 230,000, and now we are around only 10% of it, so maybe around 29 to 30,000. Yes, that was a really big downfall actually. Let's have a look at New World. New World peaked at 900,000, almost a million as well, so almost also a very, very big launch. And at the moment, as I mentioned before, we are currently at 5,700 players, which is actually for MMO a dead game, to be honest. So when we look at Throne and Liberty, we have a peak, and this is the launch day actually, at 326,000. So we only have a third. We only have a third of New World and a fourth of Lost Ark, which is actually surprising to me, because Throne and Liberty had not a lot of noise in the whole space, so the marketing in beforehand was not as big, because a lot of people haven't heard about the game. Still, having 326,000 players for that, I think they did a little bit less marketing for it or stuff like that, but still having 326,000 players is an okay launch. But when we see it in relations to Lost Ark or New World, it's only a third or fourth of them, so that's quite impressive in a bad way actually. These are only the Steam charts, and the Steam charts are not all the data we can extract. We also can look at the Twitch tracker. So when we look at the Twitch tracker, how many people watched the game on Twitch at the peak viewers for Lost Ark were 1.27 million people. When we look at the New World, it was 977,000 people. And when we look at Throne and Liberty, we have at the moment around 200,000 viewers watching. So that is also an indicator, and you see around all the stats, the game is not as popular as the other two games. Maybe that was a different approach from Amazon Studios as well, to not overhype it in beforehand, so that the game can build slowly player base, which can also be a very good thing, but we will figure that out in the future. So what is the summary? The summary is Throne and Liberty looks like MMO which is underperforming in case of stats, but it might have a different approach from Amazon Studios. The start is very quiet, but it could optimize the game with time, and it could optimize the player base with time. Also, the timing of the launch for Throne and Liberty, in my opinion, is not optimal, because we are still in the honeymoon phase of World of Warcraft's new expansion. And we also know World of Warcraft is potentially the MMO with the biggest player base, and every new MMO which is coming to the market does want to have players from World of Warcraft, and this is the main target audience. Maybe a wrong approach in case of launch, but if we look forward, a lot of good games are coming as well, so maybe not much to do there. So in conclusion, the stats are definitely a little bit underwhelming, and the game has a little bit to do. The developers have a little bit to do in case of gameplay, stuff like that, because that's the base of a very, very good MMO. And it all depends how much effort the developers put in the future into this game. Our opinion right now, if the game goes on like this, we potentially see a same route in case of stats like New World or Lost Ark. The game developers could pull something very incredible in the future in updates, something like that, but without anything revolutionizing coming in the future, the game will potentially have the same path as New World or Lost Ark. But that's only our subjective prediction.